Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg.
And I'm Emily.
And we're continuing our Edgar Allan Poe series with this video. And Poe's 80th work from April of 1841, A Descent into the Maelstrom. And that was published, like I say, in April 1841 in Graham's Magazine originally. Mm-hmm. And of course I have it in my
absolute monster of a book.
Suntop.
This absolute complete unit of a book.
Yeah. And that's from, that's a Suntop book, so it's limited edition. It's not available currently, but that one actually wasn't priced that bad. That was like $90 or something.
That's not bad at all.
When it came out for a big, thick book like that, where now most Suntops are over $200 per book. So
yeah.
That one was a bargain.
Yeah, and it's got everything, so.
Yeah, it's the complete. Mm-hmm. Of course, we have a better edition online.
Our custom one that we
Etsy
made for you
store.
online on our Etsy store. Please check that out.
Yeah, if you go to our Etsy store, you can check that out. It's a custom dust jacket, custom end papers, custom bookmark on a Doubleday edition of the complete Tales and Poems of Edgar Allan Poe. Yeah. So, yeah, and it's for sale. It could be yours, complete with the bookmark.
Yeah. So, without further ado,
Descent into the Maelstrom.
The synopsis. Bunch of Norwegian bros go sailing. Actually, they're fishermen. So they go out fishing on the ocean, and there is this whirlpool that happens at low tide, I believe it is. Or high tide. I can't remember which it was. Yeah, I think it's maybe high tide. And
when the currents are just right.
Yeah, well, there's a spot
in between an island and the mainland shore.
Yes, and it ends up being a really deep, dangerous whirlpool. So they're doing their best to avoid it. It is the stuff of legends. So everybody who's, seafaring pretty much knows that this thing is a dangerous monstrosity. But unfortunately, while they're out at sea, they get nailed by a hurricane or a monsoon or really severe storm of some kind. I believe it was a hurricane. And they get swept right into this whirlpool called the Maelstrom. So the entire story is basically not only surviving and enduring the storm, but this man's account of his experience going into the Maelstrom and how he saved himself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's basically the story. It's not a very long read, but it is a well-detailed read. Story. Yeah.
And it's interesting because this is a real thing near Norway.
Yeah.
Poe based it on real accounts. This whirlpool is where the term maelstrom comes from. Mm-hmm. So it I forget exactly what it was. It was not exactly maelstrom like Poe's spelling of it. It was a little different, and I think it was two words, and he used that to coin the word maelstrom. Mm-hmm. And ever since, that has been an alternate word for whirlpools in the English language. Yep. So he was playing a little bit with language and inventing his own stuff, but based on reality. And the story is based on reality. Mm-hmm. And how the sailor gets out is real-world physics.
Yes. So it's kind of like science fiction by our definition,
it is
which
science
is
fiction.
interesting.
As a matter of fact, later on in the 1960s, early 70s, Arthur C. Clarke wrote a space version of the same story.
That's awesome. Very cool.
So it is easy to consider this science fiction, even though it's not space. It is a scientific situation that the main character solves his problem through the application of science.
Yes. And unfortunately, it's also on par with Edgar Allan Poe. It is a tragedy. Unfortunately, he loses both his brothers in the catastrophe, simply because the sea is unforgiving. So this is another one of those, nature doesn't give a shit about you stories.
Yeah.
Where you definitely can endure. I mean, natural elements are absolutely terrifying. So I do love that about this story, is that nature doesn't care about your survival or not. It is a survival of the fittest situation. And if you're human and you're fish out of water and you're caught at sea during a storm, you're going to have terrible things happen. There's a lot of potential of death and dying. And then on top of that, to have this whirlpool that just can suck you down into it, which was also really well described, again, on par with Poe. A lot of run-on sentences, but a lot of great descriptions. Yeah. This man uses commas like his life depends on it. But every word is really descriptive, and you get this really cool just vision of what the horror that the narrator is experiencing. Mm-hmm. It's just a really interesting read. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't put it a top tale necessarily.
Okay.
But I definitely think it is an interesting read. I've learned a lot of seafaring words that I didn't know because I'm not a sailor. But and I had the pleasure also of finding a audio version of this story on Spotify.
Okay.
So there are a lot of, and then a guy who did narration. Oh, I wish I could remember who the narrator was. I can't remember. He did a fantastic job, though. He just had a really great cadence. It was really great. I think it was... He rates Edgar Allan Poe like bedtime stories. So it's really soft and very like... But he just has this lovely accent. So you're just having this really like horrific story read to you like it's a bedtime story. But I really enjoyed it. I read along with that.
Okay.
And it's a super accessible story. Of course, being in public domain, you can find it. Project Gutenberg, everywhere.
Well, being Edgar Allan Poe, there's so many editions of his tales and story and poems, and even the ones that aren't complete, they usually have this story. Not all of them, but many of them will have this story. So very easy to find. Yeah,
and this is my first time ever reading this story, which... Okay. At first, I thought it was going to be really boring because the narrator kind of starts slow. But this is a slow burn horror. And it's really well done. Like, it's one of those ones that at first I was just like, oh, this is going to take too long. I'm just going to get him. It's going to be like Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where I could skip all the parts where he's describing fish kind of thing. But this was actually, word for word, holistically, a really well done story.
Get into all of his description and really... pay attention to that.
It's very immersive.
It enhances what happens in the end and makes it that much more powerful of a story.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't there, it would just be, okay, the guy got into a sea accident.
Yeah.
And he lived and other people died. Oh, well.
Yeah. And I kind of had a fun time trying to figure out what genre I would place this in. Yes, it's horror, but it's also kind of cli-fi. Like climate fiction, science fiction.
Yeah,
and
not
kind
usually
of
what's meant
fiction.
by cli-fi. Climate science fiction usually is referring to climate change, like what is going on in the world now, and things like the drowned world where they extrapolate to extremes. You know, this whirlpool exists.
I know, but we're talking about a hurricane that causes this whole thing as well.
Yeah,
so I'm
but
like,
it still
almost
is
hits
real
that
world
fine
nature.
Line there. Yeah, it is real world nature for sure.
And it's that class where you don't have a monster, you don't have anything supernatural, you don't have anything cosmic. It's man against the elements. And I find that kind of thing, or man against real man, like serial killer stories, to be a lot more terrifying than
yes, because it can actually happen.
H.P. Lovecraft.
And sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. So it is one of those things where you're like, ooh. So it has its own horror element. It is not as, of course, gruesome as some of his stories are. And it's very tragic too, like just having this relationship with his brothers. At one point he's trying to communicate to his eldest brother what he's going to do to save himself. Of course, during the roar of the wind and the water and everything going on, his brother just can't understand him. So he basically has to save himself if he wants to survive, and just basically witnesses his brother die. Yeah. And it's super tragic and just heart-wrenching. But then also, what I also think is interesting about the story is in the end when he goes to tell his friends what happened to him, none of them seem to believe him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he has become this crazed, unreliable narrator, even to people who once knew him. And a lot of people, even because this catastrophe was so traumatizing for him, it turned his hair white. So his friends didn't even recognize him. Yeah. And don't believe he's actually him. So they think this guy is just basically catfishing them. So there's just tragedy upon tragedy. There's an actual tragedy of his family dying. And then the secondary tragedy of losing all his friendships. Yeah. Because of his unreliable narration. and people just being so suspicious and skeptical that he could have survived that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really sad. So you've got like these two separate tragedies.
Yeah.
So it's interesting in a lot of ways, though.
Yeah. So very good classic
Mm-hmm.
American story. Recommended to pretty much everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not, again, we keep running into these stories that I'm so amazed that Poe wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, I didn't expect him to have comedies. I
Yeah.
don't expect him to have a seafaring story. A little bit when we did that unfinished
Yeah,
novel, Arthur
Gordon.
Yeah, Arthur Gordon Pym. So we get a little of, like, this love of seafaring that I think Poe has. I think the guy just really likes to write about boats.
Well,
A little
that was
bit.
a very big part of American culture back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with Herman Melville, Edgar Allan Poe wrote some, and other authors
Yes.
wrote about the sea
Yes.
because they lived close to it and grew up close to it, and so
a major
it was
part of daily
a
life.
big part of their lives.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's just really interesting, though, because it's something you don't expect to come from Poe, and yet here he wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really fun to see these little tidbits that he's kind of come out of the woodwork with as we go through his entire bibliography.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we should say, you'll notice our location.
Yes.
We are, we're shooting like a whole month of videos in one night at Blackheart Books in Manitowoc, Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
The owner allowed us to come in and take up her time.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure the last time I was in here, I saw the complete tales of Edgar Allan Poe on the shelf back here by the classics.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for a copy, this is the place to go. And if you're and she also sells online through bookshop.org. So, you can buy from an excellent new local business that specializes in horror and thriller and that kind of stuff. She has some speculative, she has some classics, but
And of course, we are all about indie bookshop love. We are all about local libraries. All of these things are accessible at both places. So yeah, give it a look up. Check out her stuff. She's also available on Libro. So look up Blackheart Books.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And that's all we have to say about Descent into the Maelstrom, except that our next Poe story, number 81, will be The Island of the Fae, which is going to be another very surprising Edgar Allan Poe story.
He wrote a fantasy too?
Yes, he
Goodness
wrote a fantasy
gracious.
about fairies
I'm excited.
in 1841.
Did Sir Arthur Conan Doyle know about this? Was
Might
he even
have.
alive? I don't know.
Conan Doyle came after Poe.
Yeah, but was he alive? Oh well. But yeah. So thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe. Let us know what you think of any of our Edgar Allan Poe videos. Mostly The Descent into the Maelstrom, which was a fantastic read. Go ahead and read it. We'll see you next time.
All right.
Bye.